Greetings, Uncle Marv here with another episode of my Unhealthy Podcast, the show where we look at health from a little different perspective, and we talk about how to take the things that are unhealthy in life and make them healthy. It's been a couple of weeks since I've been here, but we are back. I had a couple of weeks where I had some major client projects, a lot of upgrades. For those of you that do not know, my day job is an IT professional, and a lot of my clients still have what we call on-prem servers. So we had a lot of servers that were going out of date and out of support. And in our world, we have to stay up to date. So several clients were updating servers. So that's been 3 of my last 4 weekends. One of those weekends was a visit to Mom's house because it was her birthday. So I had to keep that weekend open. I've got 2 more weeks of network upgrades, and then we get into the holidays. But I do have a lot of shows planned for you. Today, we are actually going to feature part 2 of the show that I did with Elikqitie. She is host of the Travel Gluten-free podcast. And I want to get this second show out that we had previously done because upcoming next week will be a 3rd interview with her. We'll get an update on how things are going with her. We're going to talk about some simple little topics where why eating healthy food isn't always healthy for you. We may get to some other interesting topics, but that's going to be the premise of what that show will be about. But right now, I want to get to the 2nd episode of the show that I had previously done with her. So sit back and relax and enjoy part 2 of my interview with Elikqitie. And I am here with part 2 of my interview with my friend Elikqitie. She has a podcast called Travel Gluten-free. And last episode, we did a pretty big deep dive in what it means to be gluten-free. So Elikqitie, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back, Marv. I'm excited to be back again on your show.
All right. Well, last episode, as I mentioned, we did a real deep dive in what it really means to live gluten-free. We talked about the celiac disease and all of that. That has just been an interesting journey that you've had.
Yes. It has been interesting and challenging. And sometimes I would like to throw in the towel, but I clearly can't because this is something that is permanent. So it's not like if I just went on like a specific diet and I was like, I don't want to do that diet anymore. It's too hard.
Well, it's funny you should say that because part of what I go through is, we make changes and do things in trying to lose weight and get in shape. And we'll go to not me, because I don't go to the gym, but, a lot of us, we'll go to the gym for a couple of months and then we'll stop and we'll start a diet and then we'll stop. And in your case, you can't do that. So, I had asked you before, on the last show about what does it really mean to have that mind shift, that this is how you have to live. It's not a choice.
Yeah. I know some people, one of the things I realize is that people who are much older, when they find out like over 60, tend to cheat a lot on their diet. And that's a big no-no because there are several, very serious. Well, I mean, not that any type of cancer is not serious, but there are several very aggressive, really bad cancers that are very hard to survive that you can get if you have celiac disease and eat gluten. One of which is adenocarcinoma, which is small intestinal cancer, which is the cancer my dad passed away from. But he was never diagnosed with celiac disease. He was actually diagnosed with IBS, IBS is the most commonly misdiagnosed thing you have when you have celiac disease and they misdiagnose you. So I am like 99.9% sure, even though he clearly passed away 15 years ago, we can't get him tested, but I'm pretty sure he was celiac because his mother also had an autoimmune disease as well. So my daughter is the 4th generation who has an autoimmune disease in my dad's side of the family. So yeah, so it is a big mindset shift. And basically your choices are you eat very carefully and I still get sick. I still have joint pain every day. I have to take supplements, and like there's a prescription that I take that's not an immune reducer, but what it does is it stops the inflammation from happening in my body. And it's not covered by insurance. And even with doing all of those things and exercising every day and drinking lots of water, I still have chronic symptoms. But if I wasn't as careful as I was and didn't eat healthy and take the supplements and stuff, I would be a lot worse off. Like I would not be able to work kind of deal. So it is a big mindset shift, but basically your choices are, you eat healthy and you eat gluten-free and you're very careful about what you eat and what you take and how you treat your body, or you're literally bedridden. So I choose the first one. Wow. Because bedridden is definitely not on my plan of life.
So let us do one quick thing. I want to make sure that we talk about this because I met you because of your podcast, Travel Gluten-free. Yes. So I want to make sure to let people know I'm going to have a link in the show notes to head over to Elikquitie's page and check out her show. And she has show after show after show about how to, live life on the road, gluten-free. And, let me ask you quickly, you and I have talked about the fact that, just simply being at home, trying to live gluten-free is tough. Going out to local restaurants, I'm assuming to ballparks and things like that. I'm assuming, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but you started the Travel Gluten-Free podcast because you were trying to travel and were having a difficult time doing so and staying gluten-free. Am I close?
Yes, you have hit the nail right on the head for those of us who are more mature and know that expression. It's like paperweights, you tell a paperweight to a young kid and they're like, what's a paperweight? Anyway, so I was actually traveling on a road trip, on a 3-week road trip on the Pacific Coast Highway, because I used to teach for a living. And literally like the day after I would get out of teaching, I would go somewhere and take a vacation. And I was like 4 or 5 days in and I was in California and I realized like if I get sick, I'm screwed because I'm by myself. I'm driving alone in my car. Like I'm staying by myself. I have no one to help me if I'm sick. And so when I went home, I researched and been like, okay, someone's got to have information on how you travel gluten free. And nobody really did. People had like, oh, here's some restaurants in this city or this city, but they never told you what to do. Like when you're traveling, like how to travel on an airplane or like, when you need to pack food or all those things. And so that's when I decided to start my podcast. Cause I'm like, I know there's other people out there like me who love to travel and who can't eat gluten because of medical reasons. And actually I've gotten a lot of response from people saying that like they haven't traveled for years. And because they listen to my podcast, they're now traveling because now they know enough to know how to go out and travel on their own.
Wow. I mean, just the thought right there of being stuck in an airport, on an airplane, and I have to imagine that the food that they offer, it's usually peanuts and pretzels and soda.
Or stuff with lots of sugar. If it's gluten-free, it usually has a ton of sugar in it, like Kind bars.
Okay.
Like, we have Kind bars. And I'm like, yeah, that's got like, 20 grams of sugar in it. And sugar, if I eat too much sugar, that also makes me sick because I have a very low starch tolerance because one of the side effects I have from celiac disease is called SIBO. So it's an acronym, it's SIBO. And it's basically what happens is when you have celiac disease, your digestive system isn't very efficient. So it gets really slow. And then your bacteria from your large intestine decide to come up and live in your small intestine where they should be. And then that creates a whole nother issue where you can't eat starch or sugar because like if I drank a regular soda, I would be sick for like a couple days just from the sugar. So I never drink like regular soda or anything that's like liquid sugar is the worst for me. But yeah, so being stuck on it. So that's why I always bring food with me when I'm on an airplane. Or another one that's it's even worse is like when you're on the road and you're just driving from point A to point B, I still take food with me because you just like gas stations typically don't have something I can eat. Because besides gluten, there's a bunch of other things I can't eat like corn, and rice and things. So,
oh my goodness.
I'm always carrying my food with me.
Wow. So, I mean, part of me was thinking that I was just going to ask you, this was a pretty radical lifestyle change, but, this is it sounds like it's just more than the celiac disease. I mean, corn, and what was the other thing you said you couldn't eat?
Yeah. So the other things I can't eat are corn, apples, rice, sweet potatoes, artichokes. And there's a few other foods that I'm just completely blanking, but I've got about 12 other foods besides gluten that I can't eat because of the starch level in them.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's pretty common for people with celiac disease. Like a lot of people with celiac disease also can't eat apples because apples are really inflammatory. Oh, onion and garlic is also really inflammatory if you already have a digestive issue. So like if I didn't have a digestive issue, cause like I'm Italian, I used to eat like whole cloves of garlic. Like literally I used to take a garlic, stick it in the oven, like for an hour, scoop it out and put it on my bread and eat it. If I did that now, I would be like balled over in the fetal position in pain. So, a lot of things come with when you, like there's secondary things to having an already messed up digestive tract. So there's lots of other things I have to watch out for. So I am a big label reader. It takes me a long time to go food shopping.
Wow. So I remember from the last episode, you mentioned that something like 25% of us have some sort of intestinal issues. Now, when you started the podcast, did you start that 8 years ago?
So I started my podcast in 2018.
Okay. So just 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. Did you have a big following right away? Did you have people all of a sudden that were, so glad that you popped on the scene?
Yeah, after about a year, I started getting a lot of traction, like, cause I would be, going out and doing social media and going out to like different consumer expos, like pre-COVID. And then I came out with my book, and that definitely more people discovered me through my book as well. So, but yeah, at first, I mean, like every, podcaster, cause I didn't have a platform, it started out really slow, which I expected. And then it just built up over time. And now I get regular emails from people wanting to be on my podcast every week.
Okay. So, I'm going to take a step back because I want to go back. So 8 years ago, you get diagnosed. 4 years ago, you start the podcast. So in between there, you were going through all of this exploratory, situations of, how do I, live and eat gluten-free? How do I travel? So when you were first starting out, how was it finding, resources or people that could help you?
Resources, there were resources on like, you shouldn't eat this. Like, here's a list of foods you shouldn't eat. But then, there's like a lot of little caveats, like you can't eat soy sauce because soy sauce has wheat in it. But you like maltodextrin. They say like, oh, you should be able to eat maltodextrin if you have celiac disease because maltodextrin is a starch that's made from wheat. It also can be made from corn or potato. So I can't eat maltodextrin if it's from wheat or corn because it inflames my joints and makes me sick. But I can eat maltodextrin if it's made from potatoes. So there's a lot of little things you have to watch out for. It's not just like the bread and pasta. It's like, hey, did they put maltodextrin in the salad dressing, or did they put high fructose corn syrup in XYZ? Because corn syrup is the worst for me. Like, it's not as bad as gluten, but it's definitely up there. Or like, MSG. They say like MSG is supposed to be safe for people with celiac disease, but it makes me sick. So I know I have to avoid MSG. So there's a lot of other little things, that you do. Like, I just recently found out that, when you're using paper straws, the glue in some paper straws can have gluten in it because glue is sticky. Another thing I just found out recently from another gluten-free influencer, her name is Ellen, and she has a website called The Celiac Scene. She found out that drywall, the glue in drywall, the compounding spackling glue, has gluten in it because she has a contact allergy reaction, and she was remodeling her house and broke out in hives all over her arms when she was taking down drywall. And so weird things like that, like it's in toothpaste, it's in body care stuff. So you have to be like really careful of even what you put on your skin.
So what you're saying is you got to be really smart to live gluten-free.
Yeah. You have to be very aware and very conscious and know what your limits are with, like, depending on if you're gluten intolerant or celiac. But like for me, I was feeding ducks one day and I had a piece of regular bread in my hand. And like within 3 minutes, it felt like someone had like set my hands on fire. It was burning so bad. I just literally like threw the bread to the ducks, ran inside and washed my hands for like 5 minutes.
So we also mentioned, in the last episode that you have to kind of help educate, people. on how to be gluten free. So when you're going to these restaurants and you're traveling, other states, other countries and stuff, there's got to be a big disconnect where people just don't understand. And so when you're trying to ask these questions about, do you have mogodextrin or whatever that is, I mean, people aren't going to know, are they? Like a regular server, a cook, the chef. I mean, are they really going to know all of this stuff?
So sometimes you luck out and you get a server with celiac disease. That's the best because they understand. Also, you get servers who have a relative who has celiac disease. That's also really good because they understand too, or like a really good friend that has celiac disease. And then you can get a server who doesn't understand, but they know you get, like if I explain to them I get really sick, they'll actually bring a product out to me so I can read the ingredients on the label. And that's really helpful. So like when I go out to eat at restaurants, if people are super helpful like that, we always tip them really well because we want to let them know like, hey, we really appreciate you went the extra mile to like help me out and, do all this extra stuff. So, but yeah, so it really depends on A, the server you get, and B, how well the restaurant does allergy protocols.
Okay. So as part of your podcast, was a lot of that doing exactly what you're doing right now, explaining to people, if you go into a restaurant, this is what you should do to find out if you're really being able to eat gluten-free food. So is it a lot of that? And, it almost sounds as you said a checklist, but it doesn't sound like it's a straightforward checklist.
Correct. Yeah, it is definitely not a straightforward checklist because, like one of the apps that I use a lot, it's called Find Me Gluten. So I'll go on there, I'll read it, like I'll see like, oh, this, this place has really good ratings, and all the people that are on the Find Me Gluten app are either gluten intolerant or celiac disease, and they'll say like, I'm celiac and I didn't get sick eating here. But then you have to look at like, okay, well, how long ago did they post that? Like, was it 2 years ago? Was it last week? Was it yesterday? So you have to, it's like any review, you have to find out like when it was posted so that you can determine if that's a recent post and these people have recently eaten there and have eaten there safely. And then there's the questions, and then there's like, if it's changed ownership, that's a whole nother different thing, because I've eaten at the same restaurant here in Oregon in my town where I live, McMinnville. And, it was an Asian place, and I used to go there and eat the pho, and pho usually does not have gluten in it. Not all the time. I never tell people, pho never has gluten because you never know. And so anyway, they changed ownership, and the new owner, like the son was really nice. He was like bringing the cans of soup out to me and showing me like they don't even actually make their own broth, which is really kind of a bummer because like, why would I go to a pho place if you're not making your own broth? Cause that's like, that's the whole point of getting like real authentic pho from a Vietnamese place. But anyway, I explained to him like, he said the only thing I could eat on the new menu was their summer rolls, which was rice paper with shrimp and stuff like that. So I said, okay, but like your mom needs to change her gloves and put it on a new surface. Well, clearly she did not do that because I ate that and I was sick for like 5 days afterwards. So.
Oh.
So that's a restaurant I used to be able to eat at. So then I had to go back on the app and then re-edit my review saying like, hey, this used to be a safe place to eat, but the new owners, they don't have any kind of like precautions. So don't eat here because I've gotten sick.
Okay. So a couple of questions. First of all, what is pho?
So pho is one of the most perfect foods on earth when your stomach is feeling sick, because pho is basically Vietnamese chicken noodle soup, except they use rice noodles. So pho is when they take bone broth and they boil it from anywhere from like 6 to 24 hours. So you can either get chicken pho, you can get vegetable pho, or you can get beef pho. And then they have all these things they can put in it, like rice noodles, vegetables, beef. It's really, really good. It's super tasty if they do it right. And, it's like the best food. Like when I'm not feeling good, if I eat a bowl of pho, like 9 out of 10 times I'm feeling better.
Okay. And that's a Vietnamese dish.
Vietnamese soup. Yep. It's
okay.
Vietnamese soup, basically. Yep.
Okay. Writing that down.
Yeah, so if you have not tried pho, Marvin, you totally need to go to a pho place.
Certainly have not tried pho.
You have to try it. It's one of the best foods ever.
Okay. So the next question is, so you mentioned the Find Me Gluten-free app. Mm-hmm. Now, is that kind of like a directory where people like you can add restaurants into the app and people can now use it as a guide for travel? If they want to go visit someplace, they can go to the app and here's all the restaurants that, are gluten-free or close to gluten-free.
Yeah, so people go on there, and the dedicated gluten-free restaurants, which are the restaurants that have no gluten whatsoever, have a special little like green check mark. So you can tell which ones are dedicated gluten-free. And those are the safest to go to because they don't have gluten in the restaurant at all. And then there's other restaurants that are not dedicated gluten-free, but they rate them, and people talk about like the servers and their experience and the food and how it tastes. And so, the guy who developed that, Jason Elmore, was in college when he found out he had celiac disease and found it was really hard to find safe places to eat if he was just Googling up restaurants online. So that's when he created the app. And I've actually had him on my podcast twice. I interviewed him twice, and he's actually local here in Portland area. So.
Okay. So another question popped up. Mm-hmm. So dedicated gluten-free restaurant. Obviously, that's not going to be like a national chain type thing. So how do restaurants become dedicated gluten-free?
So when a restaurant decides not to add any gluten products in their menu, they're a dedicated gluten-free restaurant. And so, those are the best ones to go to because A, you're not going to get gluten, and B, you don't have to ask a bazillion questions when you go in there and say, hey, can you change your gloves? Can you do this? Can you do that? Because it's literally like you're a normal person. You just literally like walk into the restaurant and order food off the menu without having to ask the 50 questions. So that's the best, not only because I don't have to worry about getting sick, but I feel more like a quote unquote normal person because I can just order whatever I want off the menu.
Okay. And I mean, are there a lot of these?
So in Portland, there are. So where I live an hour south of Portland in McMinnville. And so there's actually 2 dedicated gluten-free restaurants right here in the town of McMinnville where I live at. And we're a pretty small town. We have like 35,000 people. But then in Portland, there's 15 dedicated gluten-free places. There's this one place called Gem Bakery, which is like outstanding. Like I just put an episode out about Gem Bakery. And it's amazing. So depending on where you're at, there are more places. Like New York has a lot of dedicated gluten-free places. Portland does. And there's a few other cities. Chicago has a bunch. And so depending on where you're at and what city, and it's usually metropolitan areas that are going to have more dedicated gluten-free places. Like when I lived in Salt Lake City, there was only one place that was dedicated gluten-free. So it just really depends on if it's a really big foodie area, you're more likely to find dedicated gluten-free places.
Okay. Now you mentioned Salt Lake City. Is that where you were when you got diagnosed?
Yes. I lived right outside of Salt Lake in a little ski town called Park City.
Okay. So did you move to Portland because they had a ton of gluten-free restaurants?
Actually, I didn't know they had that many until I moved up here. So that was a total score. But there was other reasons I moved out of Utah, including like the whole social atmosphere was just not really conducive to being female, let's say. So,
the Sister Wives show or something? Is that?
Yeah, it's kind of like, well, there's a lot of different factors, but they also don't take you seriously if you're a female business owner, which I am. And so that's
really?
Just not cool. Yes. Oh, yes. I could tell you stories all day.
Well, that's a podcast.
That would be a whole other podcast. But yeah, so I lived in Park City for a while. And there weren't any there was one dedicated gluten-free place in Park City and there was one in Salt Lake. But there were a lot of gluten-free friendly restaurants in the area where I could go and I know I could eat safely. So, there was never like a lack of food where I lived there. But in general, like the more rural areas generally do not have safe food. And there's always exceptions. Like there's this tiny little town in Utah. It's called Kanab. There's probably like 1,000 people who live there. And because it's a big touristy area, there's now a lot of like nice restaurants that are popping up and that serves gluten-free friendly food, that I've eaten at several times that I haven't gotten sick. So, I mean, you never know. You can never say never, but in general, like the metropolitan foodie areas are going to have way more choices for you if you're gluten-free.
All right. So, man, so many questions.
So many questions, so little time.
So let me ask this in terms of how life has been for you since the time you got diagnosed till now. Obviously, doing your podcast probably opened up a lot more avenues to get information. A lot of people reaching out and saying, oh, by the way, thank you. And here's more information. So what do you think has been, let's say, the biggest change in the gluten-free world?
Oh, wow. Probably There's a couple big changes in the gluten-free world. One is that there's a lot more products coming out now that are gluten-free and vegan, because there are some people who have celiac disease who are also vegetarian, which I don't do just because I have so many things I can't eat already. I don't want to take anything else out of my diet. And then the other thing is that there's a lot more ever since I've come out with now there were people doing it before my podcast, but nobody was really doing it on a consistent basis, talking about traveling gluten-free. And now there's more people that are talking about how to travel gluten-free. Another big difference, is that there are a lot more healthier gluten-free options. So like I said before, a lot of things have rice flour in them, but there's now more foods and prepackaged foods that are grain-free, paleo-friendly, and those tend to be healthier options to eat than just like the traditional gluten-free packaged stuff. So there are more healthier gluten-free options coming out as well.
Okay, you said the word paleo, which I've heard before, but I've not heard it mentioned as part of the gluten discussion. So what exactly is paleo, and how does that fit into our discussion?
Yeah. So paleo means when you eat a paleo diet, you're basically eating the same types of foods that we did when we were hunters and gatherers like 20, 30, 40,000 years ago. So you're not eating grains. You're not eating dairy. I believe dairy is completely out. You can eat eggs, and like meat and different other things, but there's certain like types of foods like grains are out. So all of the paleo products are made with like root vegetable flours, like potato flour and potato flour, turnip flour. So like any of the root vegetables you can make into a flour, they'll use in like paleo products and some different other things. So tapioca flour, that and so paleo is really good because I can get more of a variety of food with the paleo diet products too.
Okay, wow. That makes my brain hurt keto sometimes. And keto, yes. Keto is another topic that'll be on this show, and I have a box full of keto products that somebody asked me to try, and that's a whole nother discussion.
Yes, it is.
All right. So I had another question I was going to ask you until the word paleo popped up. But let me do this. Let me go back to not only your podcast, but you said you wrote a book. Mm-hmm. And is the book still widely available on places like Amazon and places like that?
Yes. So the book is called The Guide to Traveling Gluten-Free, and I decided to put all the basics of traveling gluten-free in my book. So like I talk about like when you're preparing to travel, what you need to do, like what has gluten in it, what doesn't have gluten in it, where gluten hides. The one skincare line that I use that's on my website, it's called Lemongrass Spa because it's completely gluten-free. Skincare and hair care. So I can order anything on there and I don't
wait. So I'm sorry. We have to worry about skincare being gluten-free?
Yes.
Who puts protein in skincare?
Wheat protein, wheat germ, hops, barley, because like, I don't know if you remember this, but like years ago in the 70s, it was really popular to put beer in your hair because people were like, oh, beer is good. It's nutritious because it has B vitamins in it. But like everybody disregarded the fact that it's alcohol, and putting alcohol in your hair is damaging to it. So now, like in the past 5 years, there's been this big reflux of like, beer products, beer, hair, and skincare products. And so I have to completely stay away from all those too.
Wow. Okay. Cheese and crackers.
So that's why when I travel and I go to a hotel, I never use the soaps at a hotel because they don't have the ingredients in it and it could have gluten in it, which makes my skin feel like it's on fire.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. You could do a podcast on all of these things. And I'm sure you have. So let's get back to your book. So you mentioned all the things about traveling gluten-free and the guides and all of that stuff. My goodness.
Yeah. So I made my book so that you could read it and use it as a step-by-step guide to planning your travel if you're gluten-free.
All right. Now, I'm assuming there's going to be a version 2 because you said new things are coming out and stuff. So it almost seems as though you could do different editions of this book.
Yes. Yeah. I'm actually planning on coming out with a second edition, and I'm going to add more, like a whole chapter on, like what chain restaurants do celiac friendly protocols and are gluten-free friendly. I'm also going to add more places you can shop for gluten-free food in my book. Because one of the things I talk about in my book is like, if you're going somewhere and you're staying somewhere that has like a kitchen, like when you get there, go food shopping before you even get to your place and pick up the stuff you need and then bring it to your Air or your hotel or wherever you're staying. So I talk about that. I talk about like what snacks are good. So I'm going to add some more snacks that I like to eat when I'm traveling, and some other new things and also the NEMA sensor. So there's a sensor that I recently gotten, and it's called the NEMA sensor, NIMA. And basically what you do is you take a little bit of your food, you put it in a capsule, you stick it in the sensor, and within 5 minutes, it will tell you if there's gluten in it.
You wouldn't do that at a restaurant, would you?
Oh yeah, I've done it. Yeah, I did it actually on my cruise. And I don't think I posted my cruise one, but I did post it on the Cracker Barrel one that all my food came up with gluten in it, so I couldn't eat anything that was on my plate.
Oh. Now, did you send all that food back, and did they?
I gave it to my husband and he ate it.
Oh, okay.
That's the other thing that's really funny. People think that because I'm gluten-free and my husband is, I'm like, no, we are not genetically related. If we were, that would be weird because we're married.
You know, I did ask you about that in terms of how your family has to, I guess the right word isn't adjust.
Adapt.
Yeah. He's not adjusting his diet, but he's adapting, you know, the lifestyle, you know, so that you guys can at least enjoy food together and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, he has adjusted because like we don't like when we make dinner, we make everything gluten free. Like anytime we make food at home to share, we always make everything gluten free. And so, like when he goes out, he'll eat at like Arby's or McDonald's or whatever fast food. Like he makes me sick because he eats whatever he wants and he's perfectly fine. And I have to like really take care of my diet and watch everything I eat. Even with that, I'm still sick. I'm like, whatever, just don't talk to me.
So I was thinking of that question, and I was trying to figure out, I want to make it appropriate because if he goes out and eats McDonald's and Arby's and comes home, gives you a little kiss, you know, is that a problem?
Yeah. So we have to actually be really good. Like he has to make sure he like drinks something and washes it down before like we make physical contact, especially if he's been holding something in his hands, like a sandwich. And so he always makes sure he like wipes off his hand, washes his hands or like drinks something to make sure that and I'm sure I still get cross contaminated because, you know, we're a married couple, but yeah, I mean, it's just, you know, one of the things is like, yeah, I'm not going to not, you know, kiss or whatever, touch my husband because I have celiac disease. That's just not cool.
All right. Wow. Probably didn't think you'd ever talk about that on a show, did you?
Right. This is actually the first time I think I've talked about it on a show. I think one other person asked me about that, but that's it. Yeah. So like, luckily he doesn't drink beer. So that's not an issue because beer makes me like regular beer makes me really sick. But yeah. And there's gluten-free beer that I can get here in town. So, but yeah, so there's certain things that we have to be careful as a couple to not use. And one of the other things that's really interesting is that there are condoms that you can't use when you have celiac disease because the lubricant in the condom has gluten in it. I know.
I'm sorry, but I just trying to keep track of all of that.
Gluten in your sex life.
Wow. That's a podcast episode.
Right?
Gluten-free sex.
We need to do an episode on that, like what condoms you can safely use when you have celiac disease.
I'm writing it down.
Okay.
And I will help you with that episode. Gluten-free sex.
Gluten-free sex, yep.
All right, folks. Well, so the guide to traveling gluten-free, learn how to find safe gluten-free food options on your next travel adventure. I will put a link to that in the show notes. And yes, it is on Amazon, and you can get it in paperback and on the Kindle. How about that?
And I need to add a chapter about gluten-free condoms in there.
Yes. And if you want to listen to Elikqitie on her podcast, the travelglutenfreepodcast.com, or you can do a search in your favorite podcatcher. I'm sure you're on all of them. Google, Apple, Spotify.
Amazon. Yep, all of them.
All right. Well, Elikqitie, this has been enlightening, and I want to remind folks we are going to be doing a live show where we will get on and recap some of this, and it will give an opportunity for you as the listener to pose questions. And just note that I've already asked the sex question, so we don't need to get that asked on the show.
That's great. Well, I'm excited to come back and do that, Marv. Thank you.
All right. And that's going to do it for my second interview with Elikqitie. Thank you for listening to that. We will be back with part 3 here in the next week or so. I will be interviewing her in just a few days. And for those of you that were looking for week 4 with Coach L, her series Calling in the One, we are going to be continuing that. And the next episode of that is going to be week 4, Setting Your Course. So that will be coming up here shortly. And then we will be diving into several other episodes with some new guests as we get into the holidays and get ready for 2024. But that's going to do it for now. Thank you for tuning in. And until next time, live healthy and be happy.